Chapter 18. Commissioner Gordon pulled his car over at the edge of the destruction. He had barely recognized the stretch of Broad Avenue anymore. Windows and street lights were smashed. Twisted bits of metal littered the avenue and the sidewalks on either side. That is, where the road still existed. Up ahead, he could see the avenue abruptly stop at the lip of a crater. What had these guys been fighting with out here? Heat-seeking missiles? A dozen squad cars pulled up behind him. Gordon waved for them to stop. With the condition of Broad Avenue, they'd have to go the rest of the way on foot. Mercifully, there were very few dead bodies in the rubble ahead. Maybe, Gordon thought, they could stop it before any more died. This latest incident had broken the mayor board completely. He wouldn't talk to anyone anymore, except to mutter darkly over and over about the death of Gotham City. With the mayor gone, Harvey Dent was running police headquarters, if not the entire city, virtually single-handedly. Gordon had volunteered to see what he could do on the streets. There was no way they could have stopped the Joker's plan. His doctored coffee had affected over 90% of the force. So far, no one had died. But there were close to 2,000 police officers hospitalized all over the city. And every crook and lowlife in town realized the cops had been decimated. Robbery and looting were everywhere. What few police were left could respond only to the most extreme of alls. Dent had gotten the governor to call out the National Guard, but they couldn't be fully mobilized until the following morning. A couple of the men had come to the parade on their own initiative, but the mob had been way beyond any sort of ordinary crowd control. Gordon had ordered his men to hold back until backup could arrive. Now the reserves were here. Gordon surveyed his troops, 14 cars in all, 26 men and women, virtually all that was left of the Gotham City police force. Gordon knew a few of them by name. Others he probably hadn't seen again after their graduation from the police academy. They would all do whatever they could to keep Gotham City alive. He had the 26 spread out across the street, weapons at the ready. He put a couple of the guys who brought their high-powered rifles at either end of the line to act as point guards, with the others following in a ragged V. He led the way as they moved into the war zone. "Thomas, I think someone's following us." His mother's voice. They had just come from the theater. Why couldn't he remember the play? The sound of running feet. His mother and father, so tall to either side, hustling him down the street, away from something. But they couldn't get away, not by running. He knew that now. He could tell his mother and father not to run. How could he tell his mother and father not to run? Why didn't they know it? They ran toward a man with a gun. A boy, really. Only a few years older than he was. But the gun made him a big man. The boy with the gun turned to look at them. Bruce remembered that smile. He had seen it so many times before. But the rest of the boy's face was different. Made up like a clown. Grease paint, white with blood-red lips and wild green hair. The clown was new. Bruce knew it didn't make any difference. They still couldn't run. Why didn't his parents see? The gun went off twice before he could tell them. Twin blossoms of flame that touched both his mother and father, turning them to ash. The clown started to laugh, but Bruce knew he couldn't be afraid. "Did you ever dance with the devil by the pale moonlight?" the clown asked. But Bruce didn't cower. He didn't run. Instead, he walked toward the clown. The dance was about to begin. Then all was blackness. What was it with these good citizens? Here was the Joker, busy having a good laugh, and all these people started showing up on the side streets and bombed out buildings. Worse than that, they had the temerity to be angry. Didn't they know this was the Joker's party? Heck, they should be happy that he'd just be alive. Why, the very thought of it made him want to laugh. They didn't take kindly to that either. They actually started throwing things at him. Imagine those ingrates. That was the last time he'd ever tried to entertain citizens before he killed them. A loose brick hit his shoulder. He looked beyond the crowd and saw even more people approaching, except these newcomers seemed to be wearing police uniforms. Perhaps he considered it was time for a change of scene. He should see what had happened to the Batman, after all. He was sure Batman would do no less for him. Joker pulled one of the smaller guns from his coat and fired around into the air. The crowd of brick throwers hesitated in a most satisfying way, even backing away a bit. Much better. He turned and tried toward Batman's plane. Batman's plane exploded. Joker picked himself back up and dusted himself off. He certainly seemed to be getting tossed around tonight. Oh, well. You couldn't make an omelet without breaking a few heads. Batman's plane had been a twisted wreck before. Now it was a flaming twisted wreck. He guessed that meant a final showdown with Batman was out of the question. He'd have to have his final showdown with someone else. He cha-cha'd around the flames as he climbed the cathedral stairs, pausing at last to look at the burning wreckage. He was forgetting something. What was it? Who was it? Oh, yes, indeedy. It was a girl named Vicky. Vicky came out of hiding when she heard the explosion. It had taken her only a moment to examine Knox's wounds. The reporter had been incredibly lucky. A bullet had grazed his shoulder, glass had cut at his forehead. Besides that, he was unharmed. 2 wounds had looked messy at first, but the bleeding had already stopped. He wouldn't die from either of them. He had probably passed out from shock more than anything else. She would have to get him to the hospital soon and to get him cleaned up. But there was something else she had to do first. She had seen the plane crash into the steps of the cathedral, the Batman's plane. She had to find out what happened to Bruce. The wreck was a mess, all twisted metal and small fires. Nobody could have survived something like this. Could they? She stood there on the steps, numb from the battle she had just survived. If there was any way she could find out if Bruce was still alive, somehow put out those fires, what was left of the plane apart, Vicky stared at the wreck and felt helpless. The wreckage moved. A crumpled metal plate clustered down the steps. Batman stood in the remains of the plane. For a moment, Vicky was dumbfounded. Then she started toward the wreckage. She felt something hard and cold press her left temple. A gun barrel. The Joker's gun barrel. Looks like I'll have to get you to the church on time. Joker said in her ear. He shoved her up the steps when they reached the entrance to the cathedral. Gotta arrange for our ride, he told Vicky. He took out a walkie-talkie from his jacket pocket and thumped on the transmitter button. Gotham City Cathedral. Transportation for 2. he said into the microphone. 5 minutes. He glanced up at the top of the cathedral. Wow, that was one sucker of a tower. A lot of funny statues, gargoyles they were called, near the top. Better make it 10, he said into his walkie-talkie. Batman hauled himself from the smoldering ruins of the plane. He knew he was badly hurt. Pain stabbed his chest and he felt blood trickling down his cheek. Under his mask from a gash in his head, he looked down at his body and saw torn and bruised flesh under the shredded costume, but he was still alive. He could still move, and his task was not yet finished. He looked around. At the top of the steps, visible through the smoke from the plane, the Joker was entering the cathedral. He had someone with him, someone he was riding with a revolver, a woman, Vicky. Batman stifled an urge to cry out and began to run. Thomas, there's someone following us. He reached he wrenched open the door to Gotham Cathedral. Where were the Joker and Vicky? They must be somewhere inside the ruined building. Or maybe in the tower. Thomas, there's someone. He shut the door behind him. There was a bar next to the door, a thick piece of oak, still firm. He placed the bar in the middle brackets on the ear part of the door so that no one else could come in to disturb them. Someone following us, but they couldn't run. He listened. There was no sound. The Joker was hiding. He took a step forward into the rumble. There was a step down that he didn't see. He lost his footing. Fell heavily into an old wooden pew. The bench fell forward, knocking over the next pew before it, and the next pew before it, all the way to the front of the church, like his own private game of dominoes. The pews made a lot of noise, so much for surprise. As the first pew fell, the Joker darted out from behind the altar, holding Vicky in front of him. They paused at a door at the rear of the church. The Joker waved and called, "Missed me!" Then he pushed Vicky through the door. Batman started forward. It was hard to walk, difficult to breathe. He'd done something to his side in the plane crash. Then he made it worse when he knocked against the pews. Broken some ribs, most likely. He'd just have to hope there wasn't any internal bleeding. It couldn't be helped. Couldn't run anymore. There was someone up ahead, a man with a gun. Batman found himself at the foot-long steep flight of steps leading to the tower. 800 feet above, he began to climb. Gordon and the police climbed the stairs to the cathedral. They had met no resistance on the way. The Joker apparently was on his own, as was the Batman. The Commissioner had seen the whole drama spread out before him. The Batman's plane smashed on the steps of Gotham Cathedral, the Joker firing his gun in the air to stun the crowd and make his escape, the explosion, and Batman rising from the wreckage. Both Batman and the Joker had gone into the cathedral. Commissioner Gordon wondered what was going on inside that room right now. Part of him wanted to hold his men back and let the Batman take the Joker apart piece by piece. Part of him, Gordon realized, wished he could be the Batman. But that wasn't Commissioner Gordon's job. Even if his instincts were right, the Batman was still working outside the law. And that sort of thing couldn't work, especially in a city the size of Gotham. Maybe to say he had lost law and order for a few hours. But law and order started again, here and now. The door to the cathedral wouldn't open. It was bolted from the inside. Gordon ordered his men to beat it down. Oh, you couldn't keep a good crime fighter down. He had surprised the Joker for a moment to see that costume nut up and stumbling. But once you had survived a dunking in toxic waste, nothing surprised you for long. Maybe the two of them would have their showdown after all. They would, that is, if the Joker couldn't get out of here fast enough. But he had to eat with a helicopter in another 5 minutes, and the old slow stairs to climb. He heard Batman grunting far below him. On the steps above him, Vicky was panting. Joker himself wasn't breathing hard at all. He couldn't run. There was a man with a gun. There was more wrong with him than a few broken ribs. As the adrenaline drained from his body, he could feel where he had wrenched his right knee. He had to be careful to stand on just the right way, or his leg would give out on him. He must have torn something in his left hand as well. When he tried to straighten the last two fingers, he wanted to scream. There was a man with a gun. He knew the man's smile. He wanted to scream, but he didn't. He wouldn't give the Joker the pleasure of knowing his problems or his location. He knew the man's smile. The broken ribs dug into his side when he lifted his right leg. But he couldn't stop. The Joker was up there, somewhere, waiting for him. The Joker and Vicky. There was a trap door overhead, at the top of the stairs, and his ticket out of here. It just proved that if he kept a sunny attitude, any job would go right. He reached past Vicky and pushed open the trap door. There. Oopsie daisy! He said to Vicky as he gave her a final shove into the belfry. As the Joker followed her up, someone said, "Hey, boss." 3 men were waiting for them. The three bozos he had hired from that kung fu studio. He had never learned their names, so that's how he thought of them, as Bozo 1, Bozo 2, and Bozo 3. "What brings you here?" Joker asked the bozos. "Gang religion?" Bozo 1, a lithe, medium-sized man who wore trick boots, said, "I was getting confused down there." "We come up to get a bird's eye view of what was going on," said Bozo 2, a slightly larger, heavier man. Bozo 3, a huge black man whose face was covered with travel scars, said nothing. The Joker thought of Bozo 3 as the most dangerous of the lot. Well, well, how cozy, all of us together," Joker said. "We have time for a little exploration." He blinked to adjust his vision to the pale moonlight, which was the only source of light, and examined his surroundings. He was in a small room surrounded by 4 wooden slat-filled windows, designed to let the sound get out while keeping the rain away. There was also a pair of doors that led out to a walkway and the roof beyond. The perfect thing for a helicopter rescue. A good-sized bell was set in a rocker in the middle of the room, and there were 2 smaller rockers to either side of that bell. Both were empty. Where were the bells? The Joker almost stumbled over them as he turned around. They were that close to the trapdoor. How convenient. 2 bells so close to the edge. So close to a little accident. Joker giggled. "You ever danced with the devil by the pale moonlight?" The bells were heavy suckers. He loosened one of them from its mount, with his acid squirting flour. The heavy iron rolled down quickly, smashing through the rotten wood as it went. The Joker roared, "Ho, ho, ho, ho! This was better than bowling." Gordon barely got his men out of there in time. The noise had been horrendous. The bell had come tumbling down the stairs, crashing and banging against wooden planks and stone walls, tearing away steps and mortar as it went. As it gained momentum, it crashed through the rotten section of the steps, ripping away a whole 6-foot section. By the time the bell had smashed on the stone floor of the base of the tower, it had done its damage. Maybe they could have gotten past that 6-foot gap in the stairway, and through other similar gaps Gordon could see higher up in the tower. But the rest of the staircase was no longer solid either. Whole sections leaned crazily toward one wall or the other, and there were dozens of new holes and missing planks. The stairway would never be used again. Batman and the Joker had the battle to themselves after all. That was, Gordon thought, if both of them were still alive. "Thomas! Thomas! Thomas!" He heard his heart beat heavily in his chest. He'd barely dodged the bell. "Thomas, someone following. Can't run. Man with a gun." He was almost at the top of the stairs. If only he could ignore the pain. He closed his eyes. "Can't run. Man with a gun." He forced his eyes open and took the stairs. One, then another, and another. He rested for a moment on a window ledge. The stairs ended ahead at a closed trap door. Not far to go. Man with a gun. He knew that smile. Somehow, he was back on the stairs. Somehow, he reached the trap door. He pushed against it. It was stuck. He tried again, but he had no strength. His eyes closed again. He knew that smile. "You ever danced with the devil by the pale moonlight?" The Joker always found comfort in those words. Besides, he owed it to himself to say his little piece aloud. He had to have killed somebody with that bell. He thought he heard a noise in the trapdoor. He couldn't help himself. Blame it on the Joker's curiosity. He pulled the second heavy bell off the edge of the door and opened the trap. There was nobody down there. "Alright, way to go. I must have belled the bat," he yelled aloud with a laugh. He was glad Vicky was there to share in his triumph. Surely now she would appreciate him. He looked up at the rafters. It was dark up there. The kind of place that never saw live day. "There aren't any more of you up there, are there? Any daddy or mommy bats?" He turned to Vicky. That was a joke. "Why aren't you laughing?" He jabbed his gun barrel into her jaw and she winced in pain. "You're going to have to learn to laugh at my jokes." Light stabbed through the slats of the windows. Someone on the street had turned on spotlights. That was okay with the Joker. It would help his helicopter pilot. "Boss?" those are two said, pointing at the trapdoor. "I think I heard something moving down there." "Oh, goody goody." The Joker giggled. Our fun isn't over yet. We can play hide and seek, and whoever comes through the door, or is it? On the third try, Batman managed to push open the trap door, ignoring the agony throbbing through his body. He heaved himself up and into the belfry. He paused. He could see the glare of spotlights shining around the edges of the slats in 4 small windows, and the shapes of 2 large bells coming from below. He heard sirens and voices. Gordon would be assembling his forces, searching for an avenue of attack. But by the time he found one, whatever was going to happen would be finished. Where was the Joker? Vicky. Batman looked away from the light to allow his vision to adjust to the darkness. Then he heard it. The mocking, insane voice. It seems I have a bat in my belfry. Almost immediately there was another sound, a shriek, and from the gloom he sensed rather than saw something was hurling toward him. It was a man cartwheeling across the floor. A beam of light gleamed briefly on 2 silvery blades jutting from the man's boots. Batman had no time to think, nor did he need any. For years he had trained himself for moments like this. He had trained simply to react. The man reached the apex of his final somersault, a foot above Batman's head, and the blades arced toward Batman's face. Batman moved under the man's legs, and his fist traveled in a straight, swift line from his hip to the man's crotch. As Batman stepped aside, the man howled, dropped to the floor, clutching himself, and lay still. So the Joker wasn't alone. How many others were there? From the corner of his eye, he saw something move between the searchlights and the slatted windows. Someone was outside on the roof. Through an open door, he saw a Joker with his arm locked onto Vicky's throat and a gun pressed to Vicky's temple. He stepped back, debating whether to rush the door or attempt to get behind his quarry. He heard a rustle from the rafters 10 feet over his head, and again, without thinking, flung himself to the side. The bulk of the man's dropped past him, the sleeve of the man's outstretched arm brushing Batman's cape. The attack became a plunge as the man continued to drop through the open trapdoor and down the stairwell. There was a thud and a stifled moan. A moment's silence, and then a final echoing gong as the body hit the bell far below. He started toward the open door. Something blocked his way, a huge bulking silhouette of a man. It stepped into the light from the window, and Batman saw the face, a hideously scarred caricature of a human countenance. The scarred man was swinging a rope with a heavy steel pulley tied to one end, a weapon no less lethal for being improvised. The scarred man swung the rope. As Batman ducked, the pulley passed within an inch of his cowl, and pain lanced his side, making him gasp and for a fraction of a second lose consciousness. He backed away a step, too. A grin widened the scarred man's lips. Batman backed off a third step and paused. His timing would have to be perfect. He might not get a second chance. The rope and pulley lashed out like a whip. Instead of ducking or dancing backward, Batman took a single stride forward, inside the arc of the rope, and drove the rigid fingers of his left hand into the nerve center of the man's solar plexus. It was a strike that would instantly paralyze most human beings. The scarred man grunted, straightened, and his grin grew broader. Outside on the roof, the Joker hummed a Strauss melody as he waltzed with Vicky. I'd say we were made for each other. Beauty and the Beast, he said. Mind you, if anyone else ever calls you Beast, I'll rip their lungs out. He laughed. Behind the Joker, through the open doors, Vicky saw the shadowy form of Batman and the monster the Joker called Bozo 3. She knew Bruce, Batman, had to be injured and probably exhausted. Could he possibly win? She thought she knew the answer, and for the first time, she felt a cold lump of despair growing within her. Batman circled his opponent. His breath came in short gasps, and each gasp brought new pain. He had given the scarred man his best shot, and it accomplished nothing. How long could he continue before his legs would no longer support him? No more than a minute, surely. He scanned the belfry, searching for a weapon, but there was only the bell. The bell. Batman crouched and sprang. His jump carried him to the top of the bell. For a second, he teetered, finding his balance. Then as the scarred man began to roll the pulley over his head, Batman leapt. The scarred man sculled aside. Batman continued downward past the scarred man and into the open trap door, continued falling. Vicky saw Batman vanish below the floor of the belfry, the lump of despair filling her whole being, but only for a second. She was alone, all right. If this had to be her fight, she accepted. She looked down at the street and the searchlights. This was her weapon. The fact that they were 800 feet above the pavement. The height and her courage and her wits, those would be enough. She gritted her teeth and smiled at the Joker. You dance divinely, she purred. The scarred man peered down the stairwell. He hadn't heard the cape full land. It was so dark, impossible to see. Two legs shot up from the stairwell and clamped around the scarred man's head. Batman grabbed the part of the broken rafter just under the trapdoor and hung there until the bulk of his enemy appeared in the opening, as he knew it would. Then he bent his body in an upward V and slammed his legs to either side of the scarred man's head. The pain was beyond anything he had ever imagined, but although he felt it, he somehow no longer cared about it. He levered his legs past the lip of the trapdoor and rammed the scarred man's head and skull into the bell. Once, twice, again and again. The scarred man relaxed, went limp. His body slid into the opening as Batman released it, plummeted down into the stairwell. Vicky pressed herself against the Joker. You say just beautiful things, she murmured. Just keep moving back, she told herself. Keep moving toward the edge of the parapet. She rubbed her cheek against his. She's so strong, and I love purple. The Joker stopped. His face stiffened. Behind Vicky, someone said, Pardon me. Have you ever danced with the devil by the moonlight? A gloved fist smashed into the Joker's jaw, knocking him away from Vicky, sending him into a sprawl through the doors and into the belfry. Batman brushed Vicky aside and followed the Joker. As the Joker was rising, Batman pivoted and kicked him into the bell. Pain? Of course Batman felt pain. It seemed as though there had never been a time when he didn't. It didn't matter. Not at all. I'm going to kill you, he said. You crazy bastard! The Joker howled. You made me, remember? You dropped me into that acid. It was very hard to settle down after that. God knows I tried. I know you did. Batman grabbed the Joker's shoulders and swung him into the slats of the nearest window. The wood splintered and the Joker tumbled outside onto the roof. The Joker was clutching his mouth. He dropped his hand and a pair of false teeth clattered to the tiles and began hopping toward the Batman. For a moment, Batman stared at the toy, distracted. The Joker punched him in the face. Batman returned the blow. The Joker stumbled, but managed to remain standing. You murdered my parents, Batman said. The Joker gaped. What are you talking about? The Batman strode forward. I made you, but you made me first. You lunatic! The Joker protested, backpedaling. Cranny ditch. I say you made me. Oh, you have to say I made you? How childish can you get? The Joker slumped and wiped at the blood dripping from his chin. He took a pair of black-rimmed glasses from a pocket and put them on. You wouldn't hit a man with glasses, would you? He simpered. Batman hit him. The Joker flailed, shuddered as he glanced over his shoulder at the emptiness, and fell off the parapet. Batman's knees buckled. Vicky rushed to him and helped him until he could stand alone. Then together they peered over the rim of the parapet. Vicky saw nothing but empty pavement below, visible in the glare of spotlights. Batman glanced upward. In the circle of the moon, there was a silhouette of a helicopter descending. Vicky gasped. Fingers had grasped her wrist and were pulling her. She had a second to see that Batman, too, was being tugged over the edge of the roof. As they dropped, Batman's arm wrapped around her waist, and abruptly she stopped falling. Batman held Vicky in one hand. The other was stretched above his head, clutching the snout of a gargoyle. The Joker stood on top of the grotesque statue, laughing. Grab something, Batman told Vicky. She found a hold on one of the gargoyle's horns. Batman released her and reached for his utility belt. The Joker stamped on his fingers. Batman grabbed the Joker's ankle. The gargoyle moved. A puff of masonry wafted from where the statue joined the wall of the cathedral. The Joker pulled his ankle free and kicked Batman in the head. A gust of wind tore at Batman and Vicky. It was the downdraft of the helicopter, now hovering directly over the belfry. The noise from its engine was deafening. The gargoyle shifted, tilted. The Joker extended a hand toward Vicky. She looked into Batman's face, asking a silent question. Do it, she shied. I can take care of myself. Vicky grabbed the Joker's hand. It slipped off the end of his arm, and Vicky's body swung outward. She began to fall, following the plastic hand toward the pavement. Batman caught her upper arm. She dangled over 800 feet of empty air, her hair whipping around her face. The gargoyle tilted further. A rope ladder dropped from the belly of the helicopter and uncoiled down to the Joker. He grasped the bottom rung with his right hand, and with his left finger waggled a farewell wave to Vicky and Batman. Ta-ta! He called. Vicky was again gripping the horn. Batman saw the Joker step onto the ladder. The roar of the helicopter grew louder as the aircraft started to rise, carrying the Joker with it. He had done his best, Batman told himself. Maybe he could get Vicky and himself to safety before the gargoyle finally tore completely loose, and then he could rest. He had earned rest. He deserved it. He remembered Thomas and Martha Wayne. Blood spilling onto the dirty sidewalk. The size of a child he had been. The years of loneliness. The Joker was rising into the circle of the moon. Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? The dance was not yet done. Batman groped at his belt and found what he sought. He lifted the small gun and squeezed the trigger. A thin metal line shot up and whipped around the Joker's ankles. Batman wrapped the near end of the line around the gargoyle's snout and secured it. The Joker's eyes widened as he saw what was happening. He screamed, "Stop! Wait! Down! Down!" His voice was lost in the roar of the engine. His body stretched between the ladder and Batman's line. Batman boosted Vicky onto the gargoyle and from there onto a ledge. With a clatter of broken masonry, the gargoyle wrenched free of the wall and, like a pendulum, veered outward. Hanging from the Joker's ankles, the helicopter dipped a few feet as the engine grew still louder, began to climb again. Joker's arms trembled with strain. Slowly, his fingers uncurled from the ladder. For an instant, he seemed to be suspended in midair. Then his lips split apart in a huge grin, and he laughed. He shrieked with laughter as he plunged down, down, down. The gargoyle shattered on the pavement, and the laughter stopped. But it echoed through the canyons of the city. It seemed to echo forever. Vicky flattened herself against the wall of the cathedral, aware that Batman was beside her. Her eyes were squeezed shut. She could hear, but she didn't want to see. She felt herself slipping. "The ledge," Batman said. "It can't take our weight." She was falling, her eyes still closed. It was funny, she thought. After all she had been through, after the enemy was destroyed, she was going to die anyway. No. Batman saw the street rushing up to meet them. To meet him and shatter him as it shattered the gargoyle. But he had time, maybe as much as 2 seconds, and that would be enough. If it wasn't, the Joker would have won. He unsnapped his grappling hook on the back of his belt under his cape, and with a flick of his wrist, sent it shooting sideways. It clanked against one of the lower gargoyles. Batman circled his wrist around the wire attached to the hook. The steel end scraped against the back of the gargoyle's head and sank into the soft stone. Batman and Vicky jerked to a stop. The wire bit into the gauntlet of Batman's glove, and a wave of agony surged from his shoulder to his injured ribs. It was, he knew, the last new pain he would have to endure this night. He and Vicky hung a couple of yards above the pavement. Gordon and his cops were running toward them. Batman lowered Vicky to the ground, and a second later was standing at its door. It was over. Wasn't it? Until this moment, Batman had not allowed himself to the final proof. He had not seen the Joker's body. Now he did. He gazed past the shards of the gargoyle to the mall of red and green and white and purple splayed on the asphalt. He focused on the face, on the ferocious grin, a wide, mirthless slash of smile that seemed to mock death itself. "Over there!" someone yelled. Vicky turned to speak to Batman. He was gone. Epilogue. Slowly, Vicky walked to where a crowd was gathered over a body, face down, completely covered by the Batman's cape. Commissioner Gordon pushed his way through the curiosity seekers. Vicky followed his wake. "Turn him over!" While the onlookers yelled, "Now we'll see who this guy is." Vicky moved to the front of the crowd as a couple of them turned over the body. Gordon knelt next to it, shooing the curiosity seekers away. The man groaned as Gordon pulled off his hood. It was Alexander Knox. He blinked in the sunlight. "Can I still make the evening edition?" he asked. This was the first press conference Gordon could remember looking forward to in a long time. "All right," Dent began. "Members of the press, Commissioner Gordon and I have a few announcements to make." He waited for the reporters gathered around the steps to stay quiet down a bit before he continued. "First of all, to clear up a little misunderstanding, Gotham Globe reporter Alexander Knox is not the Batman." The reporters all laughed at that. Knox, standing next to Gordon and Dent, touched his bandaged head in a mock salute. "On the other hand," he remarked dryly, "Batman is not Alexander Knox." Now it was Gordon's turn to say a word or two. "Our police officers have recovered, and although some of them have sworn off coffee, they're back on duty." The reporters all laughed again. Finally, Gordon thought this sort of event was a real pleasure for himself and all of Gotham City. It just proved you have to have faith. He had always told himself that if he waited long enough, he'd find something positive about this job. Allie Knox was surprised to see a familiar face, and very attractive face, next to him on the stage. "Vicky?" "Yes." "Are you covering this press conference?" She smiled at him very sweetly. "No," she said softly. "I'm going to disappear for a while." Then she leaned over and kissed him. Really kissed him. For the first time he could remember, Alexander Knox was at a loss for words. "It was a ride, wasn't it, Allie?" Vicky said brightly as she turned to go. "See you around." "Wait a minute," Knox yelled. He couldn't let her go, not after a kiss like that. "What about us?" Vicky was already halfway down the street. Maybe Knox realized he needed a stronger argument. "What about the Pulitzer Prize?" he added. That made her turn around at least. "You get mine for me, Allie." She shouted back. But then she started walking again. He jumped off the steps of City Hall, wincing when his head complained. "What about your picture of the Batman?" he yelled. "If he wants his picture taken," Vicky called back over her shoulder. "He knows where to find me." She turned the corner and was out of sight. Another chapter closed in the life of Alexander Knox, ace reporter. Another love lost before it could even start. He'd find it downright depressing if he didn't have the evening edition to fill. He looked back up at Harvey Dent, who who had taken over the microphone again. "We received a letter from Batman this morning," Dent began as he pulled a folded piece of paper from his suit pocket. He read, "Gotham City's earned a rest from crime, but if the forces of evil should rise again to cast a shadow at the heart of the city, call me." If the forces of evil should rise again to cast a shadow? How melodramatic could you get? Knox grinned and was going to make this was going to make a great copy. The public loved this sort of thing. "Question," he yelled out at the podium. He was, he realized, much more comfortable on this side of the press conference. "How do we call him?" "You gave us a signal," Gordon replied. He walked over to the far end of the stairs, where they had rigged up a searchlight. Gordon turned it on. The beam, bright and yellow, shone on the side of Gotham Cathedral, a yellow moon surrounding the shape of a bat. Well, Knox thought, the public was going to love this, too. Vicky Vale might be gone, but the Batman wasn't. Pulitzer Prize, here I come. Vicky walked slowly through the city at sunset, a city that somehow felt much safer than it had before. Two small boys ran out of an alley, almost colliding with her. But both of the kids were wearing torn blankets behind them. Vicky realized they were supposed to be capes. "Sorry, lady," one of the boys apologized. "Who was playing Batman?" She watched them run away. It was nice kids could play like that again. She heard the sound overhead, like a boot landing on cement. She looked up. It was Batman. A car pulled up to her side. A limousine. Alfred waved to her from the driver's seat. "I thought champagne might be in order, ma'am," the butler suggested. Vicky glanced up at the roof again. Batman was gone. She got in the car. The bottle sat in an ice bucket already opened for her. "Mr. Wayne said to tell you he'd be a bit late," Alfred remarked. Vicky poured herself some champagne. "I'm not surprised, Alfred," she replied. "I'm not surprised." They turned off the bat signal as the sun set over Gotham City, a much quieter Gotham City. Down on the streets, people laughed, music played, life went on, and overhead, the gargoyles watched silently from the old Gotham Cathedral. Long ago, it was believed that gargoyles could protect the place from evil. One of the gargoyles moved. It was the Batman.